What if I told you the greatest threat to your relationship right now isn't that you're disagreeing? What if the real danger is that we've entirely forgotten how to see through someone else's eyes without feeling like we're losing our own ground? Let's talk about it. Let's get started. Welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. You can catch us on all your favorite platforms. We're talking Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, TikTok. You can listen to our episodes on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and our home at Podbean. We want to hear from you folks. Reach out to us at catalystmotivationpodcast@gmail.com. That's catalystmotivationpodcast@gmail.com. Join the Catalyst community today. And welcome to episode 151, The Anatomy of a Disagreement. Okay, so think about the last time you found yourself in a heated debate. Right? Maybe it was over a holiday dinner table, like it usually happens, right? Or in a passive-aggressive Slack thread at work, or in a comment section of a social media post. In that moment, when the other person was speaking, what were you actually doing? Were you listening to understand a perspective, or were you just reloading your emotional weapon, waiting for them to take a breath so you can fire back? Yeah, that's what I thought. We've all fallen into this dangerous mental trap where we treat listening like a zero-sum game. We operate under this unspoken rule. If I validate your logic, that means I'm invalidating my own. Huh? Right? There's a massive life-altering difference between comprehension and concession. Understanding is not agreement. Let me repeat that. Understanding is not agreement. Okay, so let me give you an example of this and how this plays out when we get it wrong, okay? A few months ago, a close friend of mine, let's call him Dave, right? Dave hit me up. Dave was furious, right? He just spent 3 hours arguing with his partner about, of all things, the dishwasher, specifically how to load it. Kind of reminds me of my mother and my uncle fighting over an air conditioner. But let me focus on Dave, all right? Now, Dave's a meticulous loader, right? Bowls on top, plates facing the center, fork prongs up. His partner, however, views the dishwasher as a chaotic game of Tetris, right? Throw things and pray for the best. Dave told me I kept explaining the mechanics of water flow and spiral optimization, and she wouldn't get it. So I stopped him and said, Dave, man, I'm sure she understands how a dishwasher works. She just doesn't care about water flow the way you do. You're not arguing about dishes anymore. You're arguing because you think her refusal to do it your way means she's not listening to you. See, Dave equated her understanding his logic with her needing to agree and change her behavior, right? When she didn't do that, he felt invisible. We do this constantly with big things in life because we stumble so badly on the small ones. And when we insist that the understanding must equal agreement, we build a psychological prison for ourselves. We become hypervigilant. You start filtering every conversation through a defensive shield, thinking, if I agree that their point makes sense from their perspective, I'm somehow betraying my own values. Right? Now let's look what happens in our brains when we encounter opposing views, right? Now, behavioral scientists have found that when our core beliefs are challenged, our brains process that data using the exact pathways triggered by physical danger, right? When your amygdala fires up, right, your heart rate increases, your brain literally treats, a differing political opinion or corporate strategy like a saber-toothed tiger trying to eat you. It's insane. It is. According to a recent study on the socio-political polarization, Over 60% of people report actively avoiding conversations with individuals who hold differing core beliefs simply because they find the interaction too emotionally draining. And I've come across a lot of those people. I'm sure you have too. And think about that. Think about it right now. We're living in a world right now where we're choosing isolation over connection because we don't know how to navigate the space between understanding and agreeing. We are choosing isolation over connection because we don't know how to navigate the space between understanding and agreement. Think about that, folks. We've basically developed a collective allergy to nuance. It's like we're all suffering from a bad case of certainty syndrome. It's the comforting yet completely delusional idea that if you are right, I must be wrong. And if I understand you, I must be complicit in your rightness. But let's be honest for a second. Being absolutely certain about everything all the time sounds fucking exhausting, and it is. Think about waking up every day knowing exactly how everyone else's lives should be lived, how every policy should be written, and how a dishwasher should be loaded. It's a miracle our heads don't explode with the sheer weight of our own perfection. To break out of this trap, we have to look at the anatomy of true understanding. True understanding requires radical curiosity. It asks us to step into a role of an anthropologist rather than a judge. Because see, when you seek to understand someone, you aren't saying, I endorse your worldview. What you're saying is simply this. I see the matrix of experiences, fears, and history that brought you to this conclusion. Think about a time at work when a colleague completely pushed back on a project you poured your heart into. I remember a project launch early in my career where I had designed this beautiful, sweeping narrative for a new campaign. It was emotional, it was poetic, and I thought it was a masterpiece. Now, during the review, the data analyst on our team, we'll call her Sarah, looked at it and just cold-bloodedly said, this won't convert. The call to action is buried. We need to cut off the fluff and put a big red button on top. My ego instantly flared. Cut the fluff. Cut the fluff. This is art. I immediately assumed she didn't understand the creative vision. I spent 10 minutes passionately defending the aesthetic choices, treating her critique like an attack on my capability. And it wasn't until I took a breath and actually asked her, walk me through how you see the user's journey here. That I got. She showed me the bounce rate from the previous quarter. She showed me how users lose attention after 8 seconds. Did I suddenly love the idea of the giant obnoxious red button destroying my pristine design? No. But I did entirely agree with her aesthetic solution. But I understood her position completely, right? Her goal wasn't to ruin my art. Her goal was to make sure people actually stayed on the page long enough to see it. Once I separated my need for her to agree with my style from my need to understand her data, we found a middle ground that actually worked. When we bridged the gap, we shift from a posture of defense to a posture of discovery. You don't lose your footing by letting someone else explain theirs. You actually ground yourself deeper in your own truth because you aren't afraid of the contrast. So, how do we actually practice this in the wild? In the real world? How do we build the muscle of understanding without feeling terrified to capitulate or combat? Well, I want to leave you with a simple 2-step reflective tool you can use next time you feel that familiar heat rising in your chest during a disagreement. Let's call this one the perspective shift. Okay, so the next time you find yourself stuck in gridlock with a partner, a coworker, or a family member, remember these 2 steps. All right. Step one, the internal acknowledgement. The internal acknowledgement. Okay. Now, before you respond to the point you disagree with, pause. Pause and say to yourself, or even out loud to them, the following. I can see how you arrived at that conclusion based on X, whatever it is, even though I view it differently. All right. I can see how you arrived at that conclusion based on X, even though I view it differently. What this does is it lowers the defense wall in the room, right? You're giving the other person the psychological oxygen of being heard without giving away your own stance. You're separating their intelligence from their compliance. That's step one. Step two, the help me see prompt, right? Ask one simple, open-ended question that forces you to listen and forces them to explain why instead of just shouting the what. Say this. Help me understand what the most important factor is for you in this situation. Help me to understand what the most important factor is for you in this situation. When you shift the spotlight from winning the argument to mapping the territory, the entire energy of the interaction changes. You still might walk away disagreeing on the outcome, right? Dave's dishwasher still might look disorganized, like a pile of chaos, right? Your creative project still might require compromises you aren't thrilled about, but you will leave the conversation with the relationship intact. You will leave with your empathy expanded and your own values clarified, right? Listen, we don't need a world where everyone thinks exactly alike. There are a lot of people out there who want that to happen, but we don't. You don't have to like the left. You don't have to like the right. But guess what? We have to communicate. Well, if you like the right, I don't want to talk to you. No red, no blue. Like, what are we doing, folks? We don't need to think alike. It's just so boring and so twisted and really sad. We need a world where we are brave enough to stand firmly in our own convictions while holding open space to fully comprehend the convictions of others. Your opinion is different than mine, and I respect it. You have the right to choose it and do with it whatever you choose. And I hope you respect mine. Because at the end of the day, true connection isn't about finding an echo. It's about learning how to handle the harmony, the dissonance, and everything in between. Thank you so much for listening, folks. If this episode hit home, please share it with someone who might need it as a reminder that they're not alone. And for you, as always, keep showing up because the world really needs you. Like and subscribe to our podcast for more motivational content. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok for even more inspiration. And speaking of coming to middle ground, go pick up my book, The Way of Compromise. It's out now, and it's designed to make you see things differently. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 151 of the Catalyst Motivation Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time for episode 152. Go be great.